and didn't want to crank, so I've been fought with it. Finally got it going, and just got back from picking up kids, and now I'm ready to have a little serious Bible study. So I'm
there. You
good.
go. Hopefully we'll have some members here.
Back in the jail, so that's going well.
Oh, that's good.
I've got all vaccinated up, and they let me go back in. So
yeah, I've been in Pineville been going back and forth there pretty good.
Pineville, really? That's
yeah,
where my folks
going
live.
there tomorrow.
What, you got a job up there you're doing?
I look at jobs that have failed and stuff like that. Check them out. Sometimes I have to fix them. They've got the Lafayette store's got a lot of issues right now. We had all of the management there quit, and our regional manager's up there trying to put everything back together. She's got a stack of work orders. People hounding me on the phone.
That's tough.
You know, I call them up to get directions or let them know I want to meet them or make appointments, and then they have my number. So they got a number. They got a number to call.
Yeah.
But that's all right. I don't mind. You know, I wish I could do more. You know, working through the bureaucracy and all that. Everything's it's a process.
Yeah.
You can't just go and fix somebody's stuff. You know, you gotta go through corporate and you know, and then corporate at Lowe's, and then you gotta get approval for material, and then you gotta wait for it to get there, and then you gotta be scheduled in. You know, and by that time the customer's been waiting 2 or 3 weeks, and they're really not happy.
No. Hello, Miss Ann.
Well, how are you doing, Miss Ann?
Not good.
What's wrong?
I passed the street up,
No, that's not good. It's not like you.
but I was on the phone. I went all the way down to
So what are you losing your mind or what?
I was on the phone fussing with my
Oh yeah, that's me. I'll do it every
Oh,
time.
God, this thing
I'll
is
do it every
really-
time.
I didn't really, I
aggravating.
panicked, I didn't recognize where I was.
Well, I did it just a little while ago on Pete's Highway and all that traffic, you know, like 5 o'clock kind of traffic.
No.
I meant to turn on Edgewood to go to the Walmart, and I passed it, and it's like, oh no, now I'm in a huge long line of traffic for that light there at Florida Boulevard, so I had to go and U-turn. I got people beeping at me and squealing their wheels when they can finally get by. It's like, oh man, you know what? You know, I worked so...
Were you on the phone or you just missed your turn?
Huh?
You were on the phone, you said, or you just...
No, I was lost in thought.
Yeah, and I need to get some water, I'm thirsty.
Well, go get you
See,
some
when
water.
I was younger, I used to blame it on the drugs. Now I don't do drugs, so I got nothing to blame it on. It's all me
All
now.
the drinking, end up where you weren't supposed to.
Yeah. I figure I'm gonna end up where I'm going when I get there.
Okay. It's buffering. We got... Just to let everybody know, I'm sorry. And then Facebook's using the wrong camera. So I don't know. I hope it's even out there. It may not even be. I'm shutting it down.
They say, who are people? One went to the store today down here at the village.
I'm sorry?
The village
Yeah.
store. And Percy used to run it. You remember Percy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Village has been there about 2 years, huh?
I guess.
About
Okay.
that?
So Roland goes every morning to get his paper, so he comes back this morning. He said, Percy was there and up stock. I said, what's he doing putting up stock? He told me he said he was bored and he didn't have anything to do, so he came up here to put up stock. He said, yeah. He said, she's still feisty. So I don't know how to take that.
Hey, you know what? Nothing wrong with feisty.
It isn't?
No.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
World needs feisty. Everybody's rolling over these days. Whatever anybody says, they just roll over. We need a little feisty.
I've never.
That problem tonight here.
Right.
It's a shame that it's happened,
Right.
and it just
It's not
Opens the
it's
doorways to
well,
bigger and
this is
better.
what it is. It reaffirms the truth
Our need in the world.
that the church has a lot of work to do, and that Jesus was tired at the end of the day, and the only way he got to the next day was to pray all night. And I don't know how we're any different. There's so much to do, and this will continue to come, and we do what we can at the front end, and we have to do more at the back end.
That's right. And it boils down to their souls, is it?
The truth of it is, there'll be a sizable percentage of people frequent that place that are going to church on Sundays. It's just the way it is. When you have nearly 50% of church attenders looking at porn at least once a week, you know you got a problem. And we can best address the problem that's before us every week.
And our leaders are at fault too.
Well, we have the government we asked for.
Amen.
Yeah,
Well,
that's always been the case.
It's like you said in your sermon the other day. We're put in the land. We're put in this land of unbelievers. Okay, prosper, have increase your numbers, have children, and overwhelm them with what you have.
That's right. The only way that we are effective is the way that God intends for us to be effective, and that is to be present. And that's what that passage in Jeremiah is about.
It's about being present. Yeah.
You can go and you
A
can.
lot of good we'd be if we were sitting in a community where everybody was good.
Yeah, and if you sit on your hands and decide, well, I'm going to ride this out until God, provides me what I want, he's saying, That's not going to happen. You're here for the next 75 years, and the only way it's going to make a difference for these Babylonians whom I love is for you to be my people.
And now with that down, you say, do you read your Bible? And you say, yes, Ann, I read my Bible. And you say, what are you talking about? And I'll say, well, do you read your Bible?
Yeah. Yeah.
You read it every day, but are you using it? And that's the whole...
And, you know, the average readership of people in the pew every week is about 8 minutes a week. That means most of what they're reading is coming across on a soundbite on their phone. They're not really reading. Part of our problem today is that we survive, we ingest sound bites for everything.
Oh, that's nice.
And we don't even know how to find the bedrock principles of anything that we even believe. And it's important that we come to understand how to do that.
So we have an ungodly generation coming up behind us.
Well,
But this age group,
to give them some credit, they are searching. But again,
this age group got a lot on their shoulders.
oh yeah,
How old are you?
yeah, and Landry's age group.
Huh? 30-something?
Yeah.
I don't know age, especially that damn beard you got. But I'm just saying, there's a lot on y'all.
We're in chapter 19 of 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel
Okay, 2 Samuel.
19
So
verses.
I'm at 17 and 18.
Yeah, verse 8. Verse 8, it says, so fled to their own home of Absalom's rebellion and David's,
Where are you at?
2 Samuel chapter 19. Okay. Verse 8, it'd be the second part of verse 8. It would actually be 8c probably.
And what Bible do you read from?
I'm reading from the New English
Is
translation.
that the one you always use?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, each Israelite had fled to his tent.
Yeah, fled to their own homes, yeah.
Okay, I was confused.
Question is, hey, this is all over. Why haven't you come out and brought your king back home? So this is the argument. Who stakes a claim on David? There's nobody left. Literally, just about everybody's dead that could challenge David. And so, this is,
That worked out for her.
what's that?
It's nice how that worked out.
Yeah,
for her.
yeah. We've still got more to go.
If you read that, can you make a going on today, right now? A fight over...
Oh yeah, there's a fight over...
It's just a different time and a different...
Yeah, yeah. And it is more political than this was. This truly was... I don't think the people totally had lost sight of the fact that this was God's land given to God's people. And God now had a city.
But the struggle was still there.
But the struggle was still there. But this wasn't a God-ordained... This is jelly ground. So it is political in a way.
Well,
Yeah.
It's the Democrats and Republicans fight.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we happen to
So-
have a bad king right now.
So different sides always, they're going to clash. And that's what's happening here.
So,
Okay, go ahead.
who was Absalom appointed over?
Absalom
Yeah.
was anointed king when he came into Jerusalem.
So
and
when David was not.
When David was gone,
Okay.
then they anointed him king. You remember what happened. He comes into town. He sleeps with David's concubines. That's as good as making him king. When if you conquer the harem, you've conquered the king. See,
Okay, I remember that.
and so he's now king, and everyone's following Absalom except for the sizable army that David took with him, and also formed when he crossed the Jordan. There were some mercenary tribes that were non-Israeli or non-Jewish. Non-Hebrews, a better word at this point in history, that came to help him. So it really is it's not just a fight within the clans of the Hebrew people, but this is an international fight. There's others getting involved because David's putting together, if all this comes together right, this is a sizable area that he not only controls as king, but he has allies in all these other surrounding areas.
So he's kind of set up
Yeah.
for success.
Yeah. I mean, which is exactly what God told him would happen way back when. It's just the route that it's taken was not the way that obviously God would have chosen. But he never abandoned, see. It's that constant, nevertheless, this is going to happen. David can't derail what I'm doing. Saul can't derail what I'm doing. Absalom can't derail what I'm doing. God's plan is superior in every detail in this. Okay? Now, he has to do, just like in our lives, he has to deal with a lot of junk that we throw up. Okay? That is constantly, and perspective, well, he already knows. And he's not going to let these things.
So he didn't pull back promise just because David messed up.
Right. See, with Saul, it was, if you do this, then I'll do this. Well, Saul didn't do it, so God said, well, my hands. We were wrong to ask for a king. What God kept telling Samuel at that time was, I want a king that's going to be a savior. Okay, I want a king that's going to lift my people out of this mess. And we have trouble finding that king in David's life. What God wants without him, where Saul tried to do it without him. And the other thing is when we look at the Psalms that David collects. Remember, that's the priest that stayed back in Abiathar, another priest, saying, tell the leaders, the elders of Judah, why should you delay any further in bringing the king back to his palace? When everything Israel is saying has come to the king's attention. The southern Judah, and he's going to do it through Gilgal. So all the people come out from of Judah come out to Gilgal to meet the king and to help him cross the Jordan. To help him is referring to this idea of all of his entourage is coming with him. Okay. And so this is a very practical but ceremonious way of bringing him back. All right. Verse 16. And we're going to get a series here. Shimei is the first. Okay, Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Bahurim, came down quickly. Bahurim was up on a hill. He came down quickly with the men of Judah to meet the king. So this is the same guy that cursed David and threw stones at him.
So he finally came off his high.
Well, now the very king that he cursed is now king again. So his intention is to do what? Get back in his good graces, you know. There were 1,000 men from Benjamin with him, along with Ziba, the servant of Saul's household. Remember Ziba? Yeah. Ziba's the servant that's to serve Mephibosheth. David got all upset because Ziba told him that Mephibosheth wasn't coming with him. So he said, you know, I'm going to give you all that I gave Mephibosheth, which is everything that Saul had. Sizable piece of ground. Okay. So now, here is Ziba coming, the servant of Saul's household, and with him his 15 sons and 20 servants. They hurriedly crossed the Jordan within sight of the king. So here they are on the west bank. They're crossing to the east bank. They crossed at the ford in order to help the king's household cross and to do whatever he thought appropriate. So they're there as servants.
A ferry boat.
What's that?
And that's a ferry boat.
A ferry boat?
They had ferry boats back then?
I don't know about a ferry boat. But they may have some kind of floating device to help them get their things over. I don't know. The ford would be above a waterfall or something like that, where the water calms just a bit. Now, of me, my Lord, and don't recall the sin of your servant on the day when you, my Lord the king, left Jerusalem. So now he's begging, really.
So how much time passed When David left and he's now coming back.
Several months, probably. Yeah. None of these things ever happened
Maybe
quickly.
a year, they had to go.
Right. Well, I didn't think it was going to be like a month or two. I thought-
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it was like a year or.
No, not a year. This happened all rather quickly because you recall that David's Ahithophel was to go quickly and just kill David. Don't attack everybody else. I'll take a small group. We'll go quickly. This will be over. Because we know where he is. He's on this side of the Jordan. And we can get there. We can take care of this. Well, God thwarted that by confusing the advice of Ahithophel. And they were able to get across. But the whole episode in 18 carries this sense of urgency. This is happening rather quickly. But I say quickly, David has time to settle into a guest home in Mahanaim, and he's kind of taken up residence there. And so all of that kind of lends itself to happening within just a few months.
So 6-ish?
3, 4.
All these pages we've been reading
Yeah.
is, all of these
Yeah.
chapters we've been reading is in some months.
17, 18, 19. Yeah, just 2 or 3 months. Not very long.
They had horses, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought they was walking, so I think they had to have horses.
Yeah.
The king rode the horses there as well.
I mean, his people had horses, all his soldiers,
Not everybody had them. A lot of walking going on.
so they had to run.
Yeah. Okay, it says, please don't call it to mind, meaning please forget it. For I your servant, my Lord, the king. So here he is confessing his sin. Okay? You're my king. You were my king. The only reason that Shimei ever gives for cursing David is that he's got blood on his hands. Okay? Which is true. But who gave Shimei the right to say this? David said, if God has allowed him to say this, then let him say it. You know? What have you got anything to do with this? He says to Abishai when he wants to kill him. Well, comes up again. For I'm your servant, I know that I sinned. All right, and he said all that. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, replied, for this should not Shimei be put to death? After all, he cursed the Lord's anointed. And that's a big deal. Remember, David wouldn't harm a hair on Saul's head because he was God's anointed. And here Shimei is. He's cursing David, which is almost as bad as doing some bodily harm. So, if anybody deserves this,
I looked ahead of line. David replied, mind your own business.
basically, he says, yeah, what do you have in common, you sons of Zeruiah? Meaning that, what about this has anything to do with you? You know? And you find that these two, Joab and Abishai, are constantly challenging David. And David needs that to some extent. And even in this, David is able today. Should anyone be put to death in Israel today? Don't I know that today I am king over without an oath concerning this? So, no, he wanted to kill him the first time. Going on the word of Ziba that he didn't come. And the reason why he didn't come. All right? So, yeah. Then the king replied to him, why should you continue speaking like this? Okay? You see, it's kind of saying, I've heard all I need to hear now. You and Ziba will inherit the field together. All right. Okay, so what does Mephibosheth say ahead of this? You do whatever you seems right. I've already received everything that I could ever receive from the king. So fast forward in your mind to a famous story that we know about Solomon. What does Solomon do with the two women that are claiming the same baby? He says, I know how to solve this problem. I'll cut it in half. And of course the mother says, no, don't harm the child. She's the mother, give it to her. And of course Solomon says, no way, you're the mother. Okay, because you're behaving like a mother. Mm-hmm. And so Mephibosheth is behaving like the man telling the truth. All right? Mm-hmm. And so David says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to give you half, and I'm going to give Ziba. I'm going to let Ziba keep half. Which was the same arrangement, really, that had been given already when David returned all of Saul's land to Mephibosheth. But he said, Ziba, you're going to work it for him. All right? So there would have been a shared arrangement for Ziba to enjoy the fruits of that labor.
But that fellow knew he better not kill that boy. I answered my
That's right. That's right. This is like David's son. Yeah. Yeah, David's tired of losing people that are close to him. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Mephibosheth said to the king, let him have the whole thing. My lord, the king has returned safely to his house. So Mephibosheth is not concerned about land. He's concerned about being with David again and living with David in the palace and sharing the relationship they had together. Yeah. Now Barzillai, the Gileadite, had come down from Rogelim, I think. I don't know how to say these words. Rogelim. He crossed the Jordan with the king. Okay, so now this guy's coming. He's from the West Bank. He's crossing the Jordan with David to the East Bank. He's crossing to send him on his way from there. But Barzillai was very old, 80 years old, in fact. And he had taken care of the king when he stayed in Mahanaim. For he was a very rich man. So the king said to Barzillai, cross over with me, and I will take care of you while you are with me in Jerusalem. And what he's saying to him, come live with me in your final years. Okay, I'm going to take care of you. But Barzillai replied to the king, how many days do I have left to my life that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I'm now 80 years old. I am able to discern, he says, am I able to discern good or bad? He says, look, if you're bringing me into your house to be a person that offers advice to you, I'm really not the guy for it. He said, my mind's going. This is what he's admitting. He says, can I taste what I eat and drink? Am I still able to hear the voices of male and female singers? So his mind's not there. His senses are failing him. Why should I continue to be a burden to my lord the king? I will cross the Jordan with the king and go a short distance. Why should the king reward me in this way? Let me return so that I may die in my own town near the grave of my father and my mother. But look, here is your servant Kimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him whatever seems appropriate to you. So this old gentleman, who David has obviously grown close to in his time, he says, I'll cross with you, but I'm not going to stay with you. I'm old. My senses are failing. I want to die in my own house. I want to be buried with my ancestors, but take a servant, and this will be my surrogate for you. Okay.
So how long was, it's like, then was 80 years old, like we say it is today? Like relative age?
Yeah, relative age.
Because it doesn't seem like that long ago that, Moses was 900.
Yeah, well, it's been a few centuries. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I know when man's life will be 120 years.
Yeah.
And then they're talking about 80. It's like, man, they got cut short pretty quick.
Well, some scholars believe that those ages of people that were 120, 900 years, those kind of things, that they it's an attempt to describe the greatness of his life. Okay, so not literal number of years. It would just be the greatness of that person's life, and how they had they may have extended over a broader general time, but they had influence,
How old was that woman, Abraham's wife, when she had babies?
And she's 90. Abraham was 100.
Yeah, they were back in, but I'm saying
Yeah.
they weren't in that 600.
No, not in that era.
First time I've heard that
Yeah.
makes sense. 600 years.
Yeah.
It's not literally.
And so those writers that wrote that part of the Old Testament were much earlier than these writers, who probably wrote all of this a century beyond or more beyond these actual events, maybe even in the time of the exile.
And look what life spans we have now.
Yeah.
Now it's almost, if you make 50, you could.
Well, 78
So
is
depleted as to,
yeah. The median age in our country is 78. It's a little lower
yeah.
for the globe, but not much.
That's God's plan.
So it was like 900 years, maybe like 900 or 9 generations or something.
Could be, it's kind of like those other numbers where they talk about armies being the overwhelming force that so you kind of gotta
That's interesting.
it's just a literary device. It's not like people got it wrong or they're trying to deceive. It was a literary device of the day. What is life going to be like, leading up to and beyond that day of judgment? Well, leading up to that day of judgment is much mercy. We all get the chance to do what? Repent and surrender our lives to Him so that we can, on that day of judgment, move beyond that day and be with Him in this period where there is still an abundance of mercy. Because yet we will be with God. What have we done to deserve it or earn it? So we live for eternity under the mercy of the cross and all that it provides us. And that's important to recognize that this was a thing that David was exercising now. He hasn't made it to Jerusalem yet, but he's already offering mercy to everyone that he possibly can along the way.
So it's like in the beginning where he's just like being benevolent to win support.
Well, it appears at the beginning that he's doing it to win support, but when we see the whole construct, we begin to see this is really who David is. But David was his own worst enemy in remaining who he was. I mean, he showed mercy to everybody along the way until Bathsheba, and then, man, everything started coming apart for him.
Sins following.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now
he was restored.
to
right? Got the end of the story.
To the enemies of Judea, he was pretty ruthless. He was bloodthirsty. He didn't let anybody live that was going to oppose his people. What is
Could
this?
he have gotten weary of that? Maybe that's why he didn't go to war with his generals. Maybe he had seen too much death at that time.
Well, and
maybe he was turning towards mercy even then.
Well, I think some of what we saw with Bathsheba, and he wanted to go to war in this particular episode in chapter 18. And his advisors say, no, you're worth 10,000 men. If you're out there, they're just going to turn the battle to you, and it'll be over. So that may have been the same reasoning, during that led up to the Bathsheba incident. The only thing is, because he's at home doesn't mean he has to commit adultery. Okay. So that was something that was that came from within David.
God could have been showing us that even though he was a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
That he could still do wrong.
So Jesus, his great grandson later, says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. He's praying the prayer that David should have prayed.
The Catholics want to change that.
Well, don't let them.
I'm going to call them.
Write a letter.
I'll call them.
Yeah.
They want to change, lead us not into temptation.
I don't know why. It's just as plain as day,
they
right
say
there.
that Jesus can lead us into temptation.
That's not what that means.
Well, I know, but that's what they say.
Well, they need to get a better translation because the Greek doesn't even come close to saying
That's the Democrat in them.
that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Then all the men of Israel began coming to the king. They asked the king, why did our brothers, the men of Judah, sneak the king away and helped the king and his household cross the Jordan, and not only him but all of David's men as well. So now they're giving the Israelites are giving the Judeans a hard time about getting David out of town. Why did you do that? Meaning, why didn't you fight for him? You know, what's wrong with you people? Yeah. So all the men of Judah replied to the men of Israel, because the king is our close relative. Why are you so upset about this? Meaning, he's our relative. Well, we did what we thought was best. What's your problem with it? We were coming to fight you anyway. Have we eaten at the king's expense? Or have we misappropriated anything for our own use? Meaning that we've never done anything in this that has been self-serving. We've always only served our king. Which what they're saying is, you can't say that. You were fighting against him. So they're all bickering here about who's most loyal and who's most valuable at the same time to David. The men of Israel replied to the men of Judah, we have 10 shares in the king. All right, why do they say that? 10 tribes, 10 northern tribes, 2 southern tribes. So they're saying, we can say what we want because we have a greater interest in this. We have more of the people with us aligned than you do. Okay. So now this does sound a lot like modern politics. And so we have a greater claim on David than you do. So you got to remember, just days before, they were out to kill him. And now their king, Absalom, is gone. And so now they're wanting to have all that they can of David. So everybody knows that this is David's the guy. So he says, what do you want? To curse us? Weren't we the first to suggest bringing back our king? But the comments of the men of Judah were more severe than those of the men of Israel. So they finally close out this whole thing saying, but our argument's louder and better than your argument.
No
Yeah.
Now that sounds like our politics.
Yeah. So
the smaller people won the argument.
Yeah. So what does this foreshadow for us? The writer's clever, even though, because some believe that the writer of 1st and 2nd Samuel is also the writer of 1st and 2nd Kings, okay, or a group of writers that were editing this thing. And so we have a foreshadowing of what happens after Solomon dies. And the 10 kingdoms, the 10 tribes to the north defect from the 2 tribes of the south. And we have this great divide that's going on. It also demonstrates just how ununited a united kingdom can appear. Okay? So from the very beginning, way back to Saul, the Benjaminites were Saul, and that was the northern kingdom. They had aligned themselves. But the 2 southern kingdoms were not as welcome, I guess, to the north. Okay? There was a difference that had occurred somehow, somewhere. And now we're still seeing it. All the way through Saul's kingship and now in David's kingship, it's still a problem.
We see it too.
And so, anger, strife, jealousy, wanting to put, one group wanted to be more higher than another. All this is still going on that really becomes the fuel that allows for all of these neighboring pagan influences to come in. So it was their lack of understanding of who they were as God's people. So I'm going to get on a little tangent here just while we got a little time. When Adam and Eve sinned, they had to leave the presence of God, the garden, and they returned to the dirt that they were made from, and they had to work that dirt. And God began then to work a rescue plan for his creation, so to speak. He rescued them, and he still allowed them to work the land to make at least something of it. But then not too long after that, Lechem, who was Cain's great-great-grandson. He's calling for more blood. God puts a curse on anyone that harms Cain, and Lechem comes in and he says, well, if anyone harms Cain, and if anyone comes after me, let it occur to them 77 times more. Meaning that let the blood flow if anyone tries to do anything to me. And then before we know it, you go through the little table of nations, and then God's ready to destroy everything because his heart's grieved over what's happened to his people. So here we have the second thing that occurs. He has to, the flood comes and he has to cleanse everything and starts over with Noah. But you don't even get hardly out of that chapter, and there we are at the Tower of Babel. And God has to come down himself and say, okay, I gotta disrupt this. This is just pure evil what's going on here. They have no concept of who they are, who I am. But then the next thing we see is Abraham. And God chooses Abraham to be his partner in this rescue project that he has going on to save not only his creation, but his prized creation. So he tells Abraham, I've chosen you, and you're going to bless everybody. Your nation's going to be so big that the worlds aren't going to be able to escape who you are, and you and me are in this partnership, and we're going to restore this, okay? And that's what the nation of Israel is all about. Only they never get around to it, okay? But the bigger picture is, who comes out of the nation of Israel? Jesus. The priest king, the man, the God man, he comes, and he's actually the one that accomplishes the rescue mission. He's going to bring about a way for the new heaven and the new earth to be ushered in, and God himself will be able to live with his people finally. So if you want the broad, sweeping view of that, that's what it is that's going on here.
So where are we now?
Where are we now as a church?
In that meant that.
Well, we're to be a part of.
Now.
Well, we're to be a part of God's people that are involved in this rescue plan that's going on in creation, and I think Jesus has shown us how to do that.
And what's his next move? That's the scary part.
Well,
His next big move.
I think our current move is, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I've been preaching on it for 9 weeks now. If we're not the image of God in the world, then who is?
The devil.
No one is. If we're not the image of God in the world, then the world doesn't know who God is. This is how he's arranged this to work. You see what I'm saying?
No, go that one more time.
You're a believer in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Okay? How is the world going to know who Jesus is if you're not living who he is?
But the devil's evident in the world today.
Yeah.
He's worshipped today.
Well, we're living in the land of the enemy.
I
The church is going
understand,
to sleep.
but
Did
there's
that- but-
going to be a major move by God because everything is coming to a close. We just don't know when.
That's right. So there is going to be this thing. Okay? But Jesus reminds us on 2 different occasions, but don't worry about what's going to be.
That's right.
Today's got enough worry of its own.
And
Okay.
he's going to take care of
But then what does he say after that? But seek first
the kingdom of God.
and his righteousness.
And then, yeah, that's right.
Then he's saying all these other things that you seem to have cares about, they're just going to come flooding in. Because those things, that's the easy thing. God does that easy thing with that. That's not a big deal. But the big deal is seeking first his kingdom every day. That's a big deal. Because when we do that, the lost world is going to know who he is. Because of what we're doing.
But the lost world is getting losser and losser, so to speak.
Well,
Such a-
and
He didn't say he was going to bring us together. He said he was going to divide us. Okay, that's another thing that we can go ahead and look at. Not everybody's gonna get saved. Not everybody can be
I ain't
saved.
saying that.
Okay?
There are more people going the other way than going this way.
Okay, so
Look at the churches that are dying.
yeah, every week there's churches that close in our country. There's probably churches opening in other places that we never hear about.
Yeah, really.
So when we look at things, in fact, when we look at things on a global scale, there's actually more people involved in worship week to week than there was 20 years ago, just not in our country. So we have to, that's statistics, that's numbers. So we can't only look at what's going on with our pitiful state of affairs that we're in to get an idea of what is happening in God's whole entire world, which is what He's concerned about, not just where we are. But what we can be concerned about is how we are participating in what God is doing to rescue His creation.
Amen.
And that's all we need to be concerned about. Because once we fall into the distraction, it reminds me of Bear Rabbit and the Tar Baby. Is what it reminds me about. You get the church distracted in these other things that seem so important to our little spot of the globe, and we start punching at those things because we're angry about them, and before we know it, we're like Bear Fox and the Tar Baby. Our feet are stuck, our hands are stuck, and he can't get out. And Bear Rabbit comes by and he's singing a song, and look at you, Bear Fox. And in this analogy, that would be Satan saying, look what I did to you, church. I got you so wrapped up in these things that you don't have any real control over. Those are powers and principalities that are working behind the scenes doing all this. God puts you here in the real world, in the real now, to meet real people. But boy, look at how I've managed to take your eye off the ball.
Now you're preaching.
You got so much trouble of your own, you can't say anything.
Yeah.
Now you're preaching, because that's what's matter with people. Brother Mark, there's so many people out there that won't even talk about God.
So the church has a duty
Amen.
to be the church, and it's not easy today. We went through a period of about 15 or 1600 years where the church didn't have to change much about how it did things, and then along comes the age of enlightenment. And the church, the very foundational dogma teachings, theological teaching, doctrinal teachings, begin to come under attack. And the church did very well at establishing those core beliefs and building a foundation of those things that we could stand on. And we did that up until about the mid-1800s. And then the world began to take a different shape. Science brought in Darwinism. That became one of the big sticking points for Bible believers. The industrial age, the industrial revolution that came about with factories and changing the way we work and how we live, that changed things rather drastically. Then you take really 3 global conflicts that were back to back to back to one another. I mean, we were barely out of World War II when Korea and Vietnam all rolled into one another. And then you think about Vietnam, that really ended in 1974. The first World Trade Center bombing occurred when? 1984. And so we have these things that are just rolling through history at a very rapid pace. Then you add to that the ability to communicate, or the inability to communicate, now that technology has really sped us up at a speed that we can't process everything. So now instead of thinking about core doctrine and foundational principles of belief, we think in sound bites and we never get back to the core. And Satan loves that too.
You can't think enough to answer the first question before you hit with 3 more.
And the reason why is because we're moving at a speed that's way too fast. And like I said, God's a 3 mile an hour God. And he's not interested. Yeah, he's not interested in that, in all this fury that we're about trying to get our opinion out and trying to do this and fix this because this is broken and all of that. God's already fixed everything that's broken.
Seek me first, my righteousness, and all will be.
Yeah. Jesus has fixed all those things. If you want to talk about race, go read Galatians 5. Galatians 3. Or anywhere where Jesus speaks. Anywhere where he acts, where race doesn't matter.
He just wants everybody on board with him.
Look at all the places where instead of judgment, Jesus offered forgiveness. If anyone came with the capacity to judge, it was Jesus. But in John 3, he says, I didn't even come to do that. I had the capacity to do it, but I haven't come to do that. He says, if anyone's going to be judged, it's going to be because of the way that you're behaving and you're thinking, what you're saying, not anything that I'm doing. I've come to offer life. And so we never get back down to those foundational things to discover what does that mean for us today. We just want to react to whatever's on the news.
Because everybody's busy on their phones.
Yeah. Well, and then so we find a soundbite or we look for things that other people say that are going to try to summarize what I'm thinking. And it can't. Because none of that has really dealt with the core of what we really need to get to.
The Bible.
Well, I believe it's the Bible. But, many people don't. So, but see, those people still get the opportunity to establish their core beliefs so that we can address them with the Bible. But we have to get them to that point. You can't just operate and say that, I'll just use this whole race thing right now. You can't just say all white people are racist, that whiteness is the problem. Get back down to the core of where you establish that instead of just saying it. And I can discuss that, and I can even address it with God's word then. But I can't address cliches, platitudes, and things that really stand on no foundation other than how loud the volume is for that. And that's kind of where we are now. It's whoever's the loudest and whoever is the most threatening. And see, God, that's...
The battle is the Lord's.
That's Satan working. That's Satan working.
Lord, you let him fight your battle. If you don't know the Lord, he can't fight your battle.
Well, but we've been invited into this. We're not just bystanders. I mean, every time that God went out to fight a battle, the people went. They didn't stay in the camp and get out their popcorn and sit up on the hill in the lounge chair and watch what God was going to do. They were there with him, and he was there with them. And we have to have that same type of relationship with him where we are trusted. Look, when God tells a group of people to go to the largest city in the land, and you're going to defeat them with clay pots and loud noise, you've got to really have a lot of trust in your God, right? Well, there's some things that are prevalent in our culture especially, and in others. You can go to places like communist China, and you don't have a free church, but you have a vibrant church. You can go to places like Russia, and they're Greek Orthodox, and they don't worship anything like us, but they love Jesus. And all of that's going on around the globe, and God in each place, because we are still a planet divided, is having to do his thing with the people that are there in order to accomplish his rescue plan. And it won't look the same everywhere. It won't look the same in Macau, China, where almost every minister is a woman because men will not come to Jesus as their Lord. So women are preachers. Are you going to shut down Macau and the work being done there because there's women preaching? We got to take a different perspective of what God is doing. And not just blanketly say women shouldn't preach, because in Macau, women, if it wasn't for women, there wouldn't be a gospel. all these different things that we have to look at in a way that says, what is God doing? And how do we understand him better, even in here, because of what he's doing here?
And how much of this are you living?
Yeah. Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
So it's a one-on-one, you know, us with God, but we have